Yay. All right. So we want to walk through a few things. As always, I know I say this, but I want to stress, please, please, please interrupt, ask questions, say, I lost that. Can you do it again? Would this work in my class? All those sorts of questions. We want to answer those. We're not bound to be quiet. We have a 28-minute agenda. So let us know if you have any questions. But we want to go through just a few things really designed to make your class simpler. These are some low-hanging fruit things in the sense of it's things that can really cut down on your workload while not requiring a ton of effort on your part. So the first thing is weighted grading. We talked about this last week, so I'm just going to ask you guys, hey, Joe and Bill, do you guys use weighted grading in your class? All right. Was that Bill that said yes?
Yeah, it was
All right.
Bill.
All right. And Joe, do you use weighted grading? By that, your syllabus weight, 20% is lab, 50% is test, something like that?
I'm here. Yeah,
Okay.
we do. So this is a 50-50 on ours.
Okay. And do you calculate those automatically in Canvas or you do it on your own?
Do it on my own.
Do it on your own. And Bill, do you use Canvas for this or not?
Yes, of course.
To calculate grades. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's talk about how to do that real quick. So it's actually really simple. So you've got this whole mess of assignments. And this is what a lot of people's classes look like when you walk in. You've got the stuff that I created, the stuff that came from, the Cosmos or the Mystery or the previous instructor, and they're all just kind of slapped in there. So what you can do, if it's something simple like you have, Joe, 50-50. If it's something where you have, 20% lab, 10% participation, 20% attendance, 5% whether I like you or not, 18% based on this, whatever, you can design it. So all you do is you click on add group. So I'm going to keep it simple. I'm going to make it so that part of my class is labs. So I created a group and you can see it hopefully down here. Yep. So I created one group called labs and one group called quizzes. And again, you can put 10, 20, 35, whatever number of groups you have, but we're going to keep it simple. So I'm going to say it's 80% labs and 20% quizzes. Once you create those groups, you can just drag stuff into there. So this is a lab. This is a quiz. Oops, and I missed. That's a quiz. That's a quiz. So I just go through and put everything into those two clumps right there. Okay, and I'm not going to drag whatever, we got 20 things there because we all have better things to do. But we would just put everything in the appropriate groups. So labs, quizzes, discussion boards, participation, whatever it is, you put your stuff in there. And then once you've done that, we simply go up into this More button, the settings, click on it, and you see this assignment groups weight. All right, I click on that and you'll notice it's turned off right now. So it's not being weighted at this point in time. It's doing I'm going to calculate everything by hand or however you do that. If we click on this box, all right, so we have these groups here and I've got these two up here because I still have stuff in there, but we're going to pretend they're not there. And I said I was going to make it 80% labs and 20% quizzes. And that's all that I have to do. When I'm done with that, I click save. And you'll notice down here, the students can see this as well. 80% of my grade are labs and 20% are quizzes. And the nice thing about this is if you've ever done this the old way, and I've done it too, where you had that horrible spreadsheet and you had to calculate it, and then you had to say, okay, 80% of this total plus 20% of that total and calculate it by hand. Canvas will do all of this. So you don't have to worry about making stuff. I've heard, back in the old days where people had to make an assignment worth 263 points in order to make the math work. You don't have to worry about any of that. Throw everything in your labs and Canvas will automatically give it an 80% weighting. Throw all your quizzes into that group and it'll give it 20%. It'll calculate that automatically. And the nice thing about this, because remember, this is about gradebooks, is it's then reflected in the gradebook. So if I click on here and go all the way over, you can see that it's now made these groupings here. Okay, so 80% of the grade is labs. And if I had grades, which I think we're going to have later this half hour, you would see a grade in there. And quizzes are 20%. And even better than that, if students go in to look at their grades, it will also reflect that. So if I'm looking at how I'm doing in Bill's class, not only will I see all my grades, not only will I see all my assignments, my missing assignments, due dates, and all of that sort of stuff, I can answer the question that students always ask, which is, why the bleep am I getting a 62% in this class? And then I scroll down and go, oh, labs are 80% of the class, and I'm missing a 100-point lab. So they can actually not just see what's missing, but see exactly how that grade is calculated. So that's transparency for the students as well. Okay, so that's it for that part. Let me get back into here. So any questions on weighted grading? Hearing no questions, I'll assume that this is awesome and perfect, and it's going to work great for you guys. All right, let's go into the next thing. Let's go into our gradebook. And this is dealing with a lot of things, but really it's dealing with the one very specific problem that a lot of faculty run into. You have that student, and we all have that student. Okay, it's the problematic student. It's a student who has turned in 3 or 4 assignments, and technically, Canvas says that they're getting an A or B in the class. And you know that that's insane because the student has 15 missing assignments. And you assume that that student has a functioning brain and they understand that if they have 15 missing assignments, they're not getting an A in the class. However, you always run into that student that at the end of the day or at the end of the quarter, you go in and enter zeros on all their missing grades and their grade drops from 93% to 48%. And they come yelling at you, or even worse, yelling to your dean or vice president going, man, yesterday I was getting an A in the class, I'm not passing. What's up with that? So this is designed, again, it does other things and it makes the grades way more accurate for your students. But if nothing else, this prevents that from happening. It's going to give your students a pretty accurate grade of, here's what you have as of Wednesday, November 2nd at 11:40 a.m. rather than here's what you have, but don't forget to add some zeros here or your grade's probably going to drop or go up because of these things. Okay. Like, for example, this student right here is getting an 83%. All right. When we go in and add zeros for the missed assignment, I think this grade is going to drop to something like a 50%. So we're going to give Zippy a much more accurate view of how they're doing. And the key point of this is, in order for this to work, what we're going to do is we're going to tell Canvas, once the due date passes, go ahead and stick a 0 in there. And so if the student turns it in late, if you give them partial credit later for some reason, you can fix that. But the default thing is, if it's due on November 1st at midnight, November 1st, put a 0 in there. That way that student has an accurate reflection of their grade. Okay. And so this is not a hard question, but in order for that to work, what does every assignment have to have? Oh, he asked a question.
A due date. A due date.
A due date. Yes, that's the key. It's got to have a due date. Okay. Otherwise, again, this is common sense, but thinking it through, if there's no due date, how is Canvas going to know that that assignment hasn't been turned in? So if you put a due date for this assignment for week 3 of November 1st, now that we're at November 2nd, Canvas says, aha, Zippy hasn't turned this assignment in. Let's give Zippy a 0. So if you don't have any due dates and your classes kind of do stuff when you feel like it, nothing wrong with that. I understand instructors don't have due dates for various reasons, but if you don't have due dates, this won't work because the process, as Canvas says, it's now November 2nd. Do I need to slap any zeros in the grade book? All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to check and see. So let's go into here and look at our assignments. And if you haven't seen this, this is a great feature in Canvas. So on your assignments page over on the right, we click on assignment groups, edit assignment dates. And it will tell us if all of our assignments have due dates. So for example, sometimes when you copy stuff, the due dates don't get fixed and everything in here says, April of 2021 or something like that. So we can go in and fix it. All right. So let's make this 11/1/22 tab. Let's make a few of these. There we are.
Tim, on that, what I typically do is when I merge the course together at the beginning,
Mm-hmm.
And it gives you a date on all the assignments, so you don't have to go through individually like that, and you can put
Yep.
that date and start date in.
Mm-hmm.
Then you don't have to do it, itemize it per course one by one this way.
Correct. And it should do that, but if you've been here long enough, you know it doesn't always work. So if it carries over and if it shifts them all, that's great. And it puts a new date in. But if something happens and it gets a little wonky, going into this screen, and again, you went into assignments and then edit dates, I can fix all these dates at once rather than go in and fix the dates individually. Okay. So I'm just putting a few due dates on these. And I click on save. All right. So now when I go into my gradebook, I've got my wheel over here, or gear, which means settings in pretty much any context. So I click on that. And you'll notice the very first thing that we see is what? Apply or automatically apply grade for missing assignments. It's turned off by default because it doesn't want students freaking out when they get a bunch of zeros. You have to manually turn it on. So I'm going to say, yes, I want to turn it on. And I want all missing assignments to get a 0. All right. And then once I'm done, that's all I have to do. Say, give all missing assignments a 0. Click on apply settings. Okay, and you'll notice nothing changed, but I'm assuming as soon as I hit refresh here, there you go. So it's added zeros for all missing assignments that have a due date passed. Remember, I put a few in there that said they were due November 8th. Those don't have zeros yet, but everything that was due November 1st now has a 0 automatically assigned.
Tim?
Okay, yeah.
Tim, so, and now if a student turns something in, will it give me the little, what is it, a notebook or calculator or something to let me know that I should go in and grade it? Or do I have to go and check and see if they turned in something late?
That is an excellent question, and I don't know the answer to it. That's fabulous. It will show up under your submissions, like on the right-hand side, but I don't know if it overrides. I may actually do that after we're done here and look it up.
Could you,
That's why
could you check on that? Because that's yeah, because that's how I track whether or not there's stuff less that I have to grade.
Okay.
And I know if I go in and I individually set assignments to 0, sometimes I have to go back in and check and see if students turn stuff in.
Did it? Okay. I'll get back to you on that. That's a great question because it does slap the grade in. Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
One other feature on zeros, and Joe, I assume this is going to be for you a lot. Do you have a lot of assignments? I don't know, maybe you don't, but do you have a lot of assignments where basically if you're upright and conscious in the class, you get 10 points?
Yeah.
Okay. So what's nice about that is you can do those individually. So let's say you've got a 10-point assignment for you showed up for class, or you cleaned up your workbench or something like that, or you just turned it in. I'm not even grading it. I just want to make sure you handed a piece of paper in, stuff like that, which happens in classes. Okay. What you can do, I'm going to look at this. How did it go this week right here? And again, I've got my 3 dots here, and you can also set a default grade for an individual assignment. So for one student, it's not a big help, but let's say Joe's got 28 students in his class. He's going to click on set default grade and give everybody 10 points. He is not going to click overwrite already entered grades because he doesn't want to take 8s and erase them with 10s if he's already graded some, but click that at set default grade and it gives everybody a 10. And now what Joe can do is he's got 28 students. The 2 students who didn't do the assignment, he can go in and change them to 0, but that saves him having to enter 10 26 times. It slaps 28 10s in there, and he only has to fix the 2. So again, we go to this more button in the individual assignment, click on set default grade and enter the grade. And remember not to check overwrite grades. Okay. So Bill, you already asked one good question. Are there any other questions on default grades?
Okay, so this is a highly specific question to me, but
of course it is, Bill. I would expect nothing less from you.
So I have some assignments that are graded externally from a tool that's imported into Canvas. And some of them, I just noticed, do this where they, if it's past the due date and the tool hasn't reported in, it gives a 0, but some of the tools don't do that. Is there a way, I mean, should I go in and check with whoever made the tool and see how it integrates with Canvas? Is there something I can
Yeah,
tweak there?
that's a great question, and your tentative solution is exactly the right one because those are LTIs.
Yeah, the
Without knowing
LTS,
the
I'm sorry,
tool,
right.
yeah,
Yeah,
we wouldn't know how it does it and kind of what the interface does because they all have different things. One example that I know because I have to fight with this all the time is some LTIs install themselves in the left-hand navigation menu and some don't, and you have to go do battle with the publisher who thinks that putting their link in every single student in every single class for the rest of their life sounds like a fabulous idea. So yeah, contact the person who has that LTI, the publisher specifically, and say, how does that interact and how does that report it? And if it's not the way that you want, see if there's a way to fix it. And unfortunately, the answer might be, sorry, drop dead. And I hope that's not it, but you need to contact them.
right. Okay, so you haven't had any experience with My Open Math. You don't know.
No, I don't. Again, if you can't get an answer, feel free to shoot me an email and I'll be happy to research it and dig up on it. But it's going to be a case by case basis. And I don't know off the top of my head that one, how they're reported.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions?
Darn, unfortunately.
Sorry, Bill. Wish I could have got that one for you.
That's all right. It's okay.
Yeah. All right. And then the last thing we want to talk about, so that's kind of hint or number 2. Let's talk about how to use a rubric on an assignment. Okay, so I'm going to click on assignments here. And again, the point of this is making your grading much easier. The nice thing about a rubric, and my apologies if I'm insulting everybody's intelligence in the room and you're all like, shut up, Tim, we understand what a rubric does, but to make sure we're kind of all on the same page, the point of a rubric is to let your students know how they're going to be graded. So if it's, Bill on an essay, it says you're going to get, 10 points for citing your sources. You're going to get 50 points for how well you develop the 3 main ideas. You're going to get 20 points for whether it's 3 pages or not. So he can tell the students in advance how it's going to be graded. And then the flip side of that is then he can actually grade it that way. So if he said it's 10% on your sources, then when he goes to grade it, we're going to show you how to do this in a second. When he goes to grade it on the side of that speed grader, it's going to say there's 10 points available for sources. And he can say it met the standard and gets 10 points, or he's approaching the standard and gets 8 points, or wherever he sets that up in advance. And we're not going to go too deep into the weeds on that, but that's the point is now Bill doesn't have to sit there and go, how many points should I give that guy for this assignment? He's already told everybody how it's going to be graded, and he's staring at that rubric as he grades, and he just goes through and says 10 points, 8 points, 22 points, 14 points, and it calculates that grade. Okay, so that's the benefit of it. It's broadcasting to students how they're going to be graded so they know as they're doing the assignment. And then as you grade, everybody's being graded the same way rather than go, do I like this essay or not kind of thing. And Joe, I know a lot of your stuff isn't essays. You can still do the same thing. If they're repairing something, you can say, okay, you get 10 points for diagnosing the problem correctly. You get 20 points for a valid solution. You get another 5 points for getting it done in a timely manner. So you could go down and say, if it's fixing a carburetor, here's how you can get 100 points for this assignment here, for this lab. So it's not all just esoteric stuff like, did I put footnotes in or did I use the Queen's English or something like that? You can make it 10 points for participation, 5 points for being on time, and 5 points for asking one question during the class. So you can make it whatever you want. Okay. All right. So all I do is I go into my assignment and I'm going to create an assignment. And let's call it, I was going to say carburetor, and then I realized I have no idea how to spell carburetor. So we'll call it lab. Sorry, Joe. I was going to make it easy for you with carburetor. And then I type in my instructions. I'm going to leave all this because we know how to do that. And we click on save and publish. So we have this assignment. And now, as you'll notice, you have this plus rubric box. All right. So I click on it and I'm starting from scratch. So I'm going to create a rubric from scratch. Okay. And the key thing to remember is a lot of people, when they think of rubrics, think of these big giant things. I've got 5 criteria and 5 levels, and those are great and awesome, and you can use them, but it doesn't have to be anything that heavy. For example, if it's a discussion board, I can make it worth 10 points and you get 5 points for posting and 5 points for responding or something like that. So I'm going to keep this real simple and realize we can make it just more criteria in either direction. So we're going to call this one, I'm going to click on this edit button and say, we're going to call this, we talked about sources already. So let's just call it sources. Okay. Bill, pretend you're teaching English this quarter. How many sources would someone need on an essay?
It would depend on, I say 5.
5. Okay. So, by the way, I can even put that right in here. Uses 5 sources. So you can broadcast as much of your rubric as you want to students and make it plainly visible to them. But what I'm going to do is under here, I'm going to give people 5 points. Used 5 sources. And no one likes their standards of full marks and stuff like that. What people tend to use are things that are very competency based, like mastery or competency or approaching competency and stuff like that. So I'm going to call this mastery. So I can change that name also. Let's say I want to make it worth 20 points. So I can change this however I want. So that 20 points for mastery. Bill, you're a nice guy, so you give partial credit, right?
Oh, yeah.
Please say yes.
Yes.
Otherwise,
yeah,
you ruin
yeah,
our
yeah.
presentation.
No,
yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So I click on plus and let's call this competency instead of mastery. And they're supposed to use 5, but you're going to say if they use 3, they at least know how to use a source. They didn't just leave it blank. So you're going to give them 10 points. There we are. And then if somebody just turns it in with no sources, okay, so that's how we create a rubric. And then we could do more things, again, if we're talking about an essay, you can have sources, you can have grammar, you can have development of thought, response to prompts, whatever it is. If we're using for other things, again, like a discussion board, respond to people, they clean their workbench after they were done. Did they show up for class? You can make whatever you want as the rubric. Okay. And then the key is you've got these 5 check boxes and you want to click on use this rubric for assignment grading. Okay, and when we're done, we click on create rubric. What that checkbox does is, and you're going to see it in a second, when we go to grade it, that's going to show up for us. So create rubric. And it's giving us a warning that you'll see. I said it was 100 points and my rubric only adds to 20. It gave me a heads up that that doesn't add to 100, but we're just going to skip that and go on. So what happens when I go to speed grader over here, and I go to this lab, notice it says view rubric over here. If I click on this, there's my rubric right there. So I have my student who turned it in. Let's say that they didn't quite master it, but because Bill's an awesome guy and doesn't like flunking his entire class, he's going to give them partial credit. So I click on that because they had 3 sources instead of 5, and you'll notice it assigned them 10 out of 20 points. Okay. And that's all there is to grading with rubrics. On this case, we're going to need to add more points in here when we're done, but that works for now because we're just, again, trying to get this done quickly. You create the rubric, you say how you're going to grade it, and then when you pull it up in Speed Grader, you just simply go through and click, okay, they had no sources, or they had 7 sources, or they had 4 sources. You click how many points they have, and that's automatically integrated into the grade. You can still do comments on all those other items as well. Okay. All right. So that is, let's kill this. That is our quick run through. So we talked about how to weight your grades so that it matches your syllabus. We talked about how to add zeros so your gradebook is much more accurate as students go through, especially halfway through the grade. And then we talked about how to build a rubric and how to import that into Speed Grader so that you can then grade your students according to that rubric. All right. So any questions on those?
No, that's good. That was good introduction.
Okay. All right, then, seeing as how we don't have any questions and we're at exactly 11:58, I will make sure y'all are entered in the gift card drawing. I know that's important, so we'll do that. And if you guys have any questions, please let us know. And Bill, I've got notes here, so I'll try and get back to you on those as soon as possible as well on those, all right?
Okay, thank you.
All right, have a great day, everybody. We'll
Thanks,
talk to you
Tim.
later.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.